story we're following out of New York today is Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's scheduled meeting with U.S. President Joe Biden. This will take place on the sidelines of the United Nations General Assembly here in New York, and the leaders are expected to discuss prospects to long-term peace in the region vis-a-vis the Palestine and Iran issue. The U.S. president is also likely to bring up Israel's contentious judicial reform plans with the prime minister. Meanwhile, the U.S. is discussing terms of a mutual defense treaty with Saudi Arabia as an incentive to normalize ties with Israel. In his UNGA speech on Tuesday, Biden mentioned the benefits to nations of normalizing ties with Israel. The proposal is also expected to come up as Biden meets Netanyahu in New York. The Biden-Netanyahu meeting comes almost 9 months after Benjamin Netanyahu returned for a record sixth term as Prime Minister of Israel. President Biden has held back to customary honor of inviting the Israeli Prime Minister to the White House. There is no White House invite for the Israeli PM on the horizon in the near term either, if there isn't one by the end of December. Netanyahu would become the first incoming Israeli premier not to get a White House visit in the first year of a term in over 5 decades. So far, Biden has even stayed away from other one-on-one get-togethers with Netanyahu. Okay. To discuss more, we are now being joined by retired Colonel Rich Outzen from Washington, D.C. He is a senior fellow at the Atlantic Council and the Jamestown Foundation. Welcome back to We On Rich. Great to talk to you. So this meeting also comes shortly after those Americans were released from Iran who were held in captivity, and the United States decided to unfreeze about $6 billion in Iranian assets from South Korea. So how tense will this conversation regarding Iran's role in the region be between Benjamin Netanyahu and President Biden, in your opinion?
Well, Susan, it's good to be with you. Thanks for having me. I think this conversation will be, I think one Israeli commentator called it sour. And of course, in this extraordinarily close relationship between the two allies, this is about as tense as you can get. Why? Because the two men are ideologically from different wings of the political spectrum. Of course, Netanyahu center-right on the Israeli spectrum, and Biden on the liberal/progressive center-left. So already they are at odds with one another on issues such as LGBTQ and other progressive priorities that are not a big deal for Netanyahu. And on the other hand, the biggest thing for Netanyahu is Iran. And this, as you've just mentioned, comes at a time when the Biden administration continues to try to find ways to have a modus vivendi with Iran, including this purchase of captives back from them that you referred to. Now, is it going to be bitter or antagonistic? I don't think so. That's not the tone of the relationship. But this will be much tenser than such meetings typically are.
And what is the theatrics of President Biden not inviting our strongest ally in the region to the White House and instead deciding to meet on the sidelines of the UNGA? First of all, what benefit does this have diplomatically for the United States and the optics of it? What message does this send to allies around the world, in your opinion?
Well, I think for the Biden administration, it's less about allies around the world and more about domestic audiences, frankly. The domestic audiences, including a good portion of the American Jewish community, are very concerned over the judicial reforms in Israel, which have been characterized by some as a judicial coup. Of course, Israel has a very unique system where the judicial branch essentially appoints itself and polices itself. It's not the same sort of balance of powers that we have in the U.S. system. So aside from the judicial reform package, there's just also the idea that Netanyahu is sort of an authoritarian leader who bullies the press and bullies the opposition, whether that's true or not. Certainly Biden's constituents think that it is. And so for those progressive constituencies, it is anathema to think that Biden would embrace people like President Erdogan of Turkey or Prime Minister Netanyahu of Israel, who are seen as, if not authoritarians, at least less democratic than they want to be. So I don't think that it's so much about those international audiences. It's more trying to prove his progressive and democratic bona fides to the home audience.
What an interesting point. All politics really are local at the end of the day, and we are in an election year. Retired Colonel Rich Outzen, thank you so much for joining us, and I look forward to speaking to you again very soon.
Thanks. Bye-bye.